In the Middle Ages, love was not always written in poems or whispered beneath moonlit windows. Sometimes it was tied into red thread, sealed in wax, hidden under pillows, or carried in secret beside the skin. People believed charms could soften a cruel husband, bring back a wandering lover, or bend another heart against its will. But behind these small tokens was a darker truth about fear, power, loneliness, and desire. Tonight, we step into a candlelit medieval world where love magic was not always romantic and rarely harmless. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy quiet, mysterious history told for sleep. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself outside the western gate of a small medieval town, just as dusk presses its cold thumb against the sky. The stones sweat with evening damp, the ditch smells of wet reeds and horse droppings, and your boots carry half the road with them in brown layers of mud. Smoke hangs in the rafters of the gatehouse, torchlight shivers on iron hinges, and somewhere beyond the wall a bell begins to count the hour with the patience of someone who has never had to sleep on straw. A cart horse breathes white mist into the winter air. The straw near the gate is damp, the river fog is nosing through the arch, and medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You tug your cloak closer and quietly accept the truth that you probably would not last a week out here, not without luck, wool, and a forgiving stomach. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, as you settle in, leave a comment telling us where you're listening from and what the local time is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The gatekeeper lifts his lantern and looks you over as if you might be a runaway apprentice, a tax collector, or someone unable to pay the evening toll. Beside him hangs a ring of iron keys fit for a giant's pantry. You offer a small coin, worn thin as a winter moon, and he bites it before waving you through. No one can quite agree whether biting coins proves anything useful, but people do it with solemn confidence, which is often how the Middle Ages handles uncertainty. You duck beneath the arch, and the town closes around you. Houses lean over the street with upper stories nearly touching, their beams blackened by age and smoke, their shutters half open like sleepy eyes. Water trickles down the central gutter, carrying straw, fish scales, onion peel, and a smell that makes you grateful the evening is cold. Above the crooked roofs, monastery bells answer the town bell, slower and deeper, marking time not by clocks but by prayer, hunger, labour, and the dark. A little dog appears near your heel before you've gone 20 paces. It is brown, damp, and narrow, with one ear folded and the determined expression of a creature who has selected you as its temporary kingdom. You do not encourage it. This changes nothing. The dog follows anyway. You pass a hanging sign painted with a faded fish and a saint whose face has mostly peeled away. A woman in a russet hood folds her stool cloths while a boy stacks wooden trenchers beneath a board. The fishmonger packs salted herring into a wicker basket. A pilgrim with a scallop badge haggles over coarse bread, and a shutter slams like a judgment. The street opens into a market square softened by dusk. The day's business is nearly done, yet the town has not gone silent. Beeswax candles burn in horn-paned windows. Rushes are swept from a tavern doorway, dark with spilled ale and boot mud. The tavern boy pushes them into the street as if sweeping away the sins of the parish. This, you suspect, is optimistic. At the base of the market cross, beneath a carved Christ worn smooth by rain, two women speak in voices low enough to invite curiosity. One wears a green cloak patched at the shoulder, The other holds a basket covered with blue cloth. You catch only scraps: a name, a ribbon, a bit of wax warmed near a hearth, something tied with red thread. When you glance their way, they stop speaking, and the woman with the basket smiles too quickly. It is the kind of smile that closes a door. You continue past them, pretending you have heard nothing, which is a useful medieval skill. Not all secrets belong to great lords, locked chests, or scribes with expensive ink. Some secrets are sold at dusk, folded in linen, tucked beneath onions, pressed into a palm between the price of salt and the blessing of a saint. Some swear that a charm can draw affection as surely as a lodestone draws iron. Others call it nonsense, a village trick for lonely hearts and empty purses. Others cross themselves and refuse to say either way. The town's life turns inward for the night. A baker slides a shutter across his front, and warm breath from the ovens rolls into the lane, smelling of rye loaves and ash. A woman with cold reddened hands carries pottage wrapped in cloth. Somewhere behind a door, a harp is tuned badly, with the confidence of someone certain the fault lies in the strings. The bell sounds again, and the dog pauses to listen, as if considering holy orders. You move toward the tavern with the peeled saint and the painted fish, because the air is colder and your cloak has begun to feel more symbolic than practical. Before you reach the door, you notice a narrow table beneath the overhang, half hidden from the square. It appears ordinary at first: scraps of wool thread, small wax shapes, dried lavender, a sprig of rue, a few bent pins, a twist of parchment tied shut with black thread. A woman's hand slides the parchment beneath the table as you pass. Her sleeve is saffron wool, finer than most. She's not a beggar, not quite a merchant, not quite anything you can name. A man beside her murmurs, "For kindness between two hearts." The phrase is gentle, too gentle. Perhaps it might mean a blessing for marriage. It might mean a prayer for peace after a quarrel. It might mean something less kind: a wish to pull another person's will like a leash hidden beneath flowers. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such things begin in hope or in hunger. You keep walking, but the words follow. Love, here, is not only a song beneath a window or a ribbon tied to a sleeve. It is contracts sealed by fathers, servants whispering over shared crusts, widows counting coins, and wives praying that a hard man softens before winter deepens. In such a world, a charm may look like a small tool grasped by desperate fingers. That does not make it harmless. Knives are tools too, and so are keys, and both can open things better left shut. At the tavern threshold you pause beneath the hanging sign. Warmth leaks through the cracks in the oak door, along with the smell of ale, onions, damp rushes, and smoke caught under low rafters. Inside, voices rise and settle like birds in a hedge. Outside, the market square dims to pewter. The woman in the saffron sleeve is gone, or perhaps only shadowed. The dog sits on your boot with solemn dedication. You bend, push open the door, and enter the rush-strewn room as the last daylight slips from the town wall behind you. The tavern receives you the way a wet wool blanket receives warmth: slowly, grudgingly, and with a smell that clings. You step down into the low room, ducking beneath a beam polished by generations of careless foreheads, and the dog slips in behind you as if it has paid rent here for years. Smoke coils under the rafters, thick enough to make the candles wear little golden halos, and the rushes on the floor sigh beneath your boots. They are newly scattered, or at least newly pretended to be scattered, because beneath the sweet green reeds lies the older tavern, truth of spilled ale, meat grease, and every muddy road that has entered since Martinmas. You find a place near the hearth where a black iron pot hangs over coals, muttering to itself. Pottage thickens within it, heavy with barley, leeks, and perhaps a bit of bacon if hope has been kind. A serving woman in a blue-grey kirtle brings you a wooden bowl, a heel of coarse bread, and ale in a chipped cup. Her sleeves are rolled, her hands are red from washing, and a loose strand of hair clings to her cheek. She sets the food before you with the air of someone who has carried more bowls than any knight has carried banners. Eat while it's warm, she says, which is good advice in any century, and especially in one where warmth is practically a visiting noble. You thank her and wrap your hands around the bowl. Steam touches your face. The first spoonful is plain, salty, and deeply welcome. Across the room, a carter snores with his chin on his chest. Two wool merchants argue over the weight of a fleece. Near the back, a pilgrim counts badges on his hat as if they might multiply by candlelight. A man with a scarred thumb mends a leather strap using a bone awl, and every so often he glances toward the door, waiting for someone or avoiding someone. No one can quite agree whether taverns are safer when crowded or more dangerous because of it. Tonight, the answer appears to be yes. The serving woman returns with a small knife to slice more bread, and her gaze drops to the dog beneath your bench. That one has chosen you, she murmurs. So it seems, you say. Better a dog than a creditor. Her mouth twitches, dry as old parchment. Then she looks toward the shuttered window, where the last smear of dusk fades behind horn panes. Her voice lowers. You came through market at the wrong hour. You lift your eyes. The ale is sour, the bread hard, the fire good. You feel sleep tugging already at the edges of your thoughts, yet the words from the square return for kindness between two hearts. The serving woman picks up your empty bread trencher. Though there is still a little pottage left in the bowl, it gives her a reason to linger. There are women out there after sundown, she says, and not all of them sell onions. You glance toward the door. Someone laughs too loudly near the barrel. A candle spits. The dog rests its chin on your boot. She had a saffron sleeve, you say. The serving woman's face stills. Aye, that would be one of them. One of whom? She leans closer, and you smell smoke in her wool, rosemary on her hands, and fatigue as plain as rain. Charm sellers, some call them blessing women, if they are being polite, liars, if they have lost money to them, witches, if the priest has eaten badly and wishes to frighten the parish. She makes the sign of the cross quickly, not dramatically, more like someone touching a familiar door latch. Some swear they are harmless, some swear otherwise. She tells you then, in pieces, because tavern secrets prefer to arrive between chores. She tells you of wax hearts warmed near a hearth until they soften, then pricked with pins while a name is whispered 3 times. She tells you of threads tied into knots, each knot meant to bind a thought, a temper, a wandering eye. She tells you of apple seeds counted beneath the tongue, of rosemary tucked under a pillow, of a bit of hair sewn into a sleeve. Such things sound small enough to laugh at, and yet no one in the room laughs when she speaks. Medieval people laugh at many things: drunk monks, stubborn geese, a man slipping in dung while trying to look noble. But they do not always laugh at longing. Longing has too many ways to become trouble. You sip the ale, the fire shifts. A coal collapses inward with a soft red sigh. Do they work, you ask? The serving woman looks across the tavern, where a young maid is wiping cups with a cloth that should have been washed sometime before the last harvest. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. If a man becomes kind after a charm, Maybe he had kindness in him already. If a woman's lover returns, maybe winter merely ended and the roads grew passable. But if someone falls ill, if a marriage turns cruel, if a promise is broken, then folk remember the wax, the thread, the whispered name. She shrugs one shoulder. A charm never has to work every time. It only has to be feared once. At the far table, the wool merchants lower their voices. You're not the only one listening. In a world where letters are rare, gossip travels faster than a royal messenger and charges less at the toll bridge. The serving woman notices and straightens, carrying a bowl away with the brisk innocence of a woman who has said nothing at all. You sit in the firelight and let the tavern settle around you. The walls are daub and timber, patched where damp has bitten them. An old horseshoe is nailed above the hearth, not for decoration, but to keep ill fortune from stepping in too boldly. Some swear iron offends wicked spirits, though blacksmiths tend to say this mostly proves the usefulness of blacksmiths. A sprig of dried saint. John's wort hangs beside the door, its yellow flowers long gone brown. A bowl of salt sits near the counter. Whether for seasoning, luck, or rats, no one seems eager to specify. The serving woman comes back with another cup of ale and sets it down without asking. "There was a girl," she says softly, "last winter. Millward's daughter. Sweet face. Poor dowry. She bought a thread charm from a woman near the bridge. For a lover. For a husband promised elsewhere. Her eyes do not meet yours, or so folk say. Some say she only wanted him to remember her. Some say she wanted his bride to sicken. Some say the bride never sickened at all, only grew tired of his wandering. Truth gets bruised when passed hand to hand. The door opens, and cold air spills across the floor. A tall man enters, rain-dark cloak around him, hood low. For one breath the whole tavern seems to listen. Then he stomps his boots, calls for ale, and becomes merely another soaked traveller. The room resumes itself. Yet you feel how easily fear moves here, how quickly a face can become a sign, how quickly a ribbon can become evidence. The serving woman gathers cups from a nearby table. Before she leaves, she bends close once more. There is one charm they whisper of, she says, not for sweetness, not for peace, for bending. The word lies between you like a cold coin, a name written and folded against the skin, wax sealed with breath. 3 knots tied while the church bell rings. They say it makes another heart turn where it is pointed. You think of the bells over the town, patient and distant. You think of the market cross in rain-worn stone. You think of the woman's saffron sleeve vanishing into dusk. And does it, you ask? The serving woman lifts the bowls against her hip. Maybe it only makes the buyer bold. Maybe that is worse. Then she is gone into the smoke and candlelight, leaving you with cooling pottage, sour ale, a dog asleep on your foot, and the uneasy warmth of a room where everyone pretends not to believe what everyone keeps repeating. Morning comes not with brightness, but with bells. They roll across the town before the sun has properly found the rooftops, low and silver in the mist, calling monks to prayer, apprentices to work, and everyone else to the delicate medieval art of being cold while pretending this is normal. You wake on a bench near the tavern hearth, your cloak pulled around you, your neck stiff from a night spent at an angle no physician would recommend unless he disliked you personally. The fire has fallen to a dull red bed of ash. The dog is still there, curled against your boot as if appointed by royal charter. The serving woman moves quietly through the room, sweeping old rushes toward the door with a birch broom. She does not speak of last night's whispers. By daylight, secrets become heavier. She gives you a small piece of coarse bread wrapped in cloth and nods toward the market square. "If you mean to see what folk hide," she says, "watch what they buy openly." You step outside into a morning of pale smoke and wet stone. The town has changed while you slept. The square that seemed nearly empty at dusk now fills with carts, baskets, awnings, and voices. Chickens complain from wicker cages. A butcher sharpens a knife on a whetstone with slow, thoughtful strokes. Fishwives set out trays of river eels and salted herring, their fingers red from cold water. A baker lifts round loaves onto a board, each one dark and heavy, made for bellies that have work to do, near the market cross. A toll collector sits behind a little table with a wax tablet and stylus, demanding coins from merchants who all look personally offended by the concept of local government. You pass beneath hanging cloths dyed in russet, indigo, and faded green. Rainwater drips from the corners of awnings. A boy carries wooden trenchers stacked against his chest. A woman sells onions braided into ropes. Another sells pilgrim badges, tiny pewter saints, scallop shells, and little stamped tokens of holy places she may or may not have ever seen. No one can quite agree whether a badge bought in the market carries the same grace as one earned on muddy roads. But the cheaper version is certainly easier on the knees. Near the edge of the square, where the smell of herbs struggles bravely against the smell of fish, you find the old herb wife. She sits beneath a patched brown canopy, wrapped in a cloak lined with rabbit fur gone thin at the cuffs. Her face is folded deeply, her eyes sharp and dark, and her stall looks, at first glance, entirely respectable. Bundles of dried sage hang beside rosemary, rue, feverfew, lavender, betony, and yarrow. Small clay jars hold salves for cracked hands. A wooden bowl contains leeches, sliding over one another like living black commas. A sign, written by someone with a careful but uncertain hand, promises remedies for toothache, fever, warts, sour stomach, weak sleep, and melancholy of the heart. That last phrase lingers. The herb wife looks up as if she has heard it in your mind. "Bad sleep?" she asks. "Mostly bad benches," you answer. She snorts. Benches are older enemies than devils. Then she gestures to a little bundle tied with linen thread. "For sleep. Put lavender near the pillow, if there are no fleas in it. If there are fleas, pray first, then burn the pillow." It is sound advice, or at least decisive. You study the stall. There are honest things here, or things that look honest enough: fennel for breath, mint for the stomach, comfrey for bruises, honey for sore throats. Medieval healing lives in the narrow lane between wisdom, guesswork, prayer, and whatever your grandmother insisted worked once in 1294. The herb wife names each plant with the tap of her finger. She speaks of hot humours and cold humours, of blood too thick, bile too sharp, hearts made heavy by grief. Then her hand drifts to a row of smaller objects partly hidden behind the jars. There are red threads wound around hazel twigs, little wax shapes wrapped in linen, pins no longer than a barley stem, a scrap of parchment folded into a triangle, an apple, dried nearly black, stuck with 3 cloves, a tiny cloth pouch with something inside that gives off the faint scent of roses and iron. For melancholy, you ask quietly. For many things, she says. The market goes on around you. A goose escapes and is recaptured by 3 people with less dignity than the goose. The toll collector argues with a potter over whether one cracked jug should count as half a jug. Somewhere a bell rings again, and the sound seems to move through the bundles of herbs, through the wax, through the small folded secrets beneath the old woman's hand. She picks up a sprig of rue, This keeps biting insects away, if the insects are reasonable. Some say it keeps envy away too, though envy is less reasonable than fleas. She ties it with thread and sets it down. A girl buys this for a doorway, and all nod. A wife buys it for her husband's sleeve, and they whisper. She lifts a twist of rosemary, for remembrance. Put it in wedding garlands, funeral wreaths, broth for the sick. No harm there, unless memory itself is harm. Then she touches the wax shape, no larger than a thumb. Melt wax for a saint's candle, and it is devotion. Shape wax like a heart and warm it while speaking a name. And suddenly the priest looks over his shoulder. You feel the unease of it then, not because the objects are strange, but because they are ordinary. Thread mends torn sleeves, wax lights altars, herbs season pottage and soothe coughs, pins hold veils in place, hair gathers in combs, breath fogs in winter air. Love magic, if that is what it is, does not arrive wearing horns and ringing bells. It hides inside household things, the small tools of women, servants, widows, and the poor, the people who have little power except what they cannot. Whisper, brew, or hide beneath a mattress. Some swear the old herb wife knows charms that can turn a heart, cool anger, wake desire, or sour another person's wedding bed. Others say she sells courage wrapped in linen, and the buyer does the rest. The truth sits somewhere between the dried sage and the leech bowl, slippery and difficult to hold. A young man approaches the stall while pretending not to. He wears a miller's cap dusted with flour and keeps glancing toward a girl at the bread stand. He buys mint, then returns, cheeks pink, to ask for something for speaking plainly. The herb wife gives him time, a pinch of salt, and a stare sharp enough to cut leather. Wash your face, she tells him, then speak plainly. You almost laugh, but softly. Not all remedies require moonlight, some require soap and a spine. When he leaves, the herb wife turns back to you. People fear love charms because they think love should be free, she says. Then they sell daughters, arrange dowries, trade land, forbid widows, praise obedience, and act surprised when hearts learn crooked paths. She slips the folded parchment behind a jar before anyone else can see it. A charm is dark when it steals. A prayer is dark when it does the same. Remember that. The morning brightens a little, thin sunlight catching shell-like patches of frost on the market stones. You buy a sprig of rosemary, though you're not sure why. The old woman tucks it into your palm and closes your fingers around it with cold, dry hands. Keep it for memory, she says, or stew. Either use is respectable. You step away from the stall, past the leeches, the wax hearts, the toll collector, the fishwives, and the goose now firmly under arrest. Behind you, the market murmurs on, ordinary and mysterious at once, while the rosemary warms slowly in your hand. By the time the market begins to thin, the bell from the abbey has rung enough times to make you feel that the day is no longer yours but belongs to whoever keeps count of hours in stone towers. You leave the square with the rosemary still in your hand, its scent clean and almost sharp enough to cut through fish, smoke, and wet wool. The dog follows, of course. It trots behind with the solemn persistence of a tiny steward assigned to your person. When you pause at a puddle to step round a broken crate, it pauses too, then looks up at you as if this shared indecision confirms a deep spiritual bond. The road toward the monastery slopes away from the market and grows quieter with every step. You pass coopers' yards with open hoops and staved barrels stacked like wooden moons. You pass a narrow lane where laundry hangs stiff in the cold. You pass a woman beating rugs with a willow stick, raising little clouds of dust that seem far too lively for such a sleepy morning. Beyond the last row of houses, The abbey wall rises, pale and worn, with lichen in the joints and crows perched along the top like dark thoughts. The gate is open to visitors. Not everyone enters an abbey for the same reasons. Some come for mass, some come for alms, some come because they have blisters, fevers, lawsuits, guilty consciences, or a cousin who claims to have touched a saint's relic and felt his limp vanish before supper. No one can quite agree whether monasteries are holier than the rest of the world or simply better organised. But even from the gate you can feel the difference. The air seems slower here. The noise of the town loosens and falls away. A lay brother receives you in the outer court. He's broad-shouldered, wool-clad, and carries a basket of kindling against one hip. His hands are cracked from labour, and his expression suggests he has spent much of his life lifting things heavier than other people's excuses. He glances at you, at the dog, and at the muddy hem of your cloak. "Guest house," he asks. "If there is room—" "There is straw," he says, which is not quite the same promise, but close enough for a medieval afternoon. He leads you across the court. Around you, the monastery moves with quiet purpose. A novice carries a pail from the well. 2 older monks cross beneath a covered walk with their heads bowed, their black habits brushing the stone. Somewhere nearby, bread is baking. Somewhere else. A bell rings again, smaller than the great abbey bell, quick and clear. Time here is divided and named. Prayers shape it. Meals interrupt it. Silence hems it in. Even the crows seem to caw more respectfully. The guest house stands near the outer edge of the complex, meant for travellers, pilgrims, and those whose business has not yet earned them entry into the more sacred hush beyond. Inside, it is simple whitewashed walls, oak benches, a narrow hearth, and pallets laid with straw and wool blankets that have clearly heard more confessions than many priests. A row of iron hooks holds cloaks dripping from the weather. The whole room smells of smoke, damp hay, onions, and the faint sweetness of beeswax. It is, in other words, unexpectedly pleasant. A monk sits at the far table with a sheet of parchment before him. He's not old, though the candlelight makes him seem so at first. His face is narrow, his hair, what remains of it, forms a careful ring above ears reddened by cold. Ink stains his fingers and the side of his hand. A small knife lies beside the parchment for scraping errors, and a horn inkwell sits near a half-burned candle. He looks like a man who has spent enough time with words to distrust most of them. The lay brother nods toward him. Brother Aldwyn keeps the guest list. Brother Aldwyn lifts his gaze. His eyes are pale and attentive in a way that makes even your boots feel examined. "Name," he asks. You give it, or something near enough to one for medieval paperwork. He copies it with careful strokes, pauses to shake a blot from the quill, and then glances at the dog. "And this one?" You look down. The dog looks up, untroubled. Uninvited, you say. Brother Aldwyn's mouth nearly becomes a smile, like most trouble. When the list is done, he sands the ink, blows softly, and motions for you to sit nearer the hearth. A boy brings a bowl of pottage, black bread, and a little dish of coarse salt. Monasteries feed you plainly but steadily, which is often a greater mercy than any rich feast. You warm your hands over the bowl and feel the road loosen from your shoulders inch by inch. For a while there is only the ordinary music of resting people's spoons against wood, a log settling in the hearth, the whisper of pages turned, the dog circling twice before sinking onto the rushes. Outside, the abbey bells go on measuring the afternoon. A pilgrim across from you removes his boots and begins inspecting a blister, with the grave expression of a scholar consulting a difficult manuscript. Another guest dozes upright against the wall, cloak over his face. As if modesty can be improvised when needed. Brother Aldwin writes a little longer, then folds his hands over the parchment. You came from the market, he says. It is not a question. I did. You lingered. You think of the herbwife's stall, the wax shapes, the folded parchment hidden behind jars. There was much to see. There always is. He turns the half-burned candle a little, straightening it in its puddle of wax, and much not meant for seeing. His tone is mild, but something in it catches. Perhaps it is the dryness. Perhaps it is the way he says the words without looking at you. He could be speaking of smuggled wine, false relics, unpaid tolls, or the 1,000 other things that hide under cloaks and in pockets. Yet the conversation seems already narrower than that. You mean the charm sellers, as you say. The pilgrim with the blister stops poking at his foot. The dozing guest stirs under his cloak. Brother Aldwin remains calm, but he lifts his eyes now, and they are sharper than before. I mean, he says, the sort of trade that borrows the language of prayer and puts it to poorer use. The room feels warmer and stiller all at once. He tells it carefully, as a monk might handle a cracked reliquary or a troublesome verse. Some of these things, he says, are foolishness only threads, mutterings, boiled herbs, moon counting, and village theatrics dressed as secret power. Some as charms of comfort, little more than fearful people needing shape for their hope. A wife tucks rosemary into bedding. A servant knots a ribbon and believes it gives courage. A mother hangs vervain above a cradle. These are near cousins to habit, and habit is a lord of its own. Then his expression darkens, though only slightly. But some, he says, aim not to steady the heart but to seize another's. The candle flame bends as the door opens and closes somewhere behind you. For a moment the draught stirs the rosemary in your sleeve, and its scent lifts between wood smoke and hot pottage. Brother Aldwin rests one ink-stained finger on the table. No one can quite agree whether such workings achieve anything beyond fear. Yet fear itself can do much. If a young man believes he has been bound, he acts bound. If a woman believes another has soured her marriage bed, she sleeps in bitterness. If jealousy seeks a cause, a wax heart is convenient. If sin wants a disguise, it often borrows a charm. You think it is all fraud? Then... He tilts his head. I think fraud is the least dangerous part. That answer settles softly but heavily. Around you, the guest house continues its quiet business. The pilgrim rewraps his foot. The other guest snores once, then stops. Somewhere in the abbey a door closes with the patient thud of oak against stone. Brother Aldwin goes on. He has seen scraps of parchment carried under shirts, he says, with names written backward. He has heard confessions involving hair stolen from combs, wax images hidden beneath beds, bread marked with signs before baking, salt sprinkled across thresholds while bells rang the evening office. Some swear that spoken words over such things are merely country nonsense. Some swear darker company answers when the words are spoken with enough hunger, even now. It is hard to tell whether the power lies in demons, deceit, or the misery of people who want to be loved more than they want to be good. He does not thunder. That is what makes him persuasive. He speaks like a man who has washed the same cup many times and is tired of pretending the stain is decorative. In the village, he says, folk call some of it love magic. But love that seeks to master is not love. It is appetite wearing a ribbon. That is a monk's sentence, if ever there was one stern, memorable, and likely to be copied into a margin by someone impressed with himself. yet the quiet in which he says it gives it weight. You ask whether the Abbey ever punishes such things. Brother Aldwin studies the candle for a moment. The manor court concerns itself when accusations grow loud. Priests rebuke, neighbours whisper, families hide what they can. As for us, we warn, we hear confession, we burn what ought not be kept. He glances toward the hearth, when people surrender it, and if they do not, his mouth becomes a line fine as a penstroke. Then it remains in the world, doing what unclean hopes always do. Outside, the bell ring again for the next office, and the sound enters through the wall as a slow, steady pulse. Brother Aldwin rises, gathering his parchment, his quill, and the small knife for scraping errors. Before he leaves, he looks down at the dog. He may stay, he says. Dogs are sometimes better company than charms. Then he turns away toward the chapel passage, his sandals whispering over stone, and you are left in the guest house with a bowl gone cool, the scent of rosemary in your sleeve, and the uneasy thought that the darkest part of love magic may not be whether it works, but what it asks the heart to become. Rain begins before evening, not as a storm, but as a patient grey stitching from sky to earth. You leave the monastery after the bell for none, with Brother Aldwin's warning still lying somewhere behind your ribs like a small cold stone. The lay brother gives you a heel of black bread, a strip of hard cheese wrapped in linen, and directions that sound simple until the road divides 3 times among hedges, cart ruts, and fields silvered with standing water. The dog trots beside you, damp already, accepting the weather with more grace than most nobles accept advice. Behind you, the abbey shrinks into mist. Its bells continue to follow for a while, fading through the rain, each note softened until it seems less struck than remembered. Your cloak drinks the wet. Mud clings to your boots in heavy cakes. Along the roadside, winter cabbages sit in low gardens behind wattle fences, their leaves dark and folded like tired hands. A man in a patched hood drives 2 pigs with a stick, though the pigs appear to be negotiating every step. Medieval transport. You reflect, is mostly mud, stubborn animals, and the bold human belief that arriving eventually counts as a plan. The pilgrim road curves past bare orchards and low fields where peasants have left ridges of turned earth for the frost. Every few furlongs, you pass small signs of human worry, a scrap of cloth tied to a hawthorn branch, a cross scratched into a gatepost, a horseshoe nailed above a byre door, a bowl set beneath an eave to catch rainwater said to cure freckles, sore eyes, or bad luck, depending on which aunt is speaking. Some swear rain gathered on certain saints' days carries blessing. Others say any rain caught in a clean bowl is mostly useful because clean water is rare and people are sensible when superstition permits. By the time you reach the roadside shrine, the light has thinned to dull pewter. It stands where the road bends near a willow and a shallow ditch, a little stone shelter no higher than a man's shoulder, roofed with rough tiles dark from moss. Inside, behind an iron grille, a painted figure of St. Agnes watches the road with a chipped face and patient eyes. Her lamb is missing one ear. A beeswax candle gutters before her in a clay cup, protected badly from the wind. Someone has set fresh rushes on the stone floor, though the rain has crept in and dampened them at the edges. You step beneath the sheltering roof and breathe out. The dog shakes itself with such commitment that the saint receives a fine sprinkling of road water. You apologize to her under your breath. It seems wise. Saints, like innkeepers, may be patient but should not be tested for sport. The shrine is crowded not with people, but with traces of them. Coins, mostly small and poor, lie in a shallow wooden dish. Pewter pilgrim badges hang from nails. Strips of ribbon knot the grill blue, red, undyed wool, faded green, saffron thread darkened by rain. Some are neatly tied with bows, others are knotted hard, pulled so tight they bite into themselves. There are pins stuck into the cracks of the stone, a little comb missing half its teeth, a dried rose tucked beneath the candle cup, and a twist of parchment sealed with a drop of wax. On the floor, near your boot, rests a tiny linen pouch that smells faintly of lavender and something metallic. You do not touch it. A young woman kneels at the side of the shrine, half hidden by her brown cloak. You notice her only when she shifts, and the wet hem of her gown whispers against the rushes. Her hands are clasped so tightly that her knuckles have paled. Beside her sits a basket covered with cloth, the sort used for eggs or bread. She's not much older than a girl, but the tiredness in her shoulders belongs to someone long acquainted with waiting. She murmurs a prayer. You hear only fragments a man's name. Soften, remember, do no harm. Then she takes from her sleeve a narrow ribbon, pale blue once, now rain dark at the edges. She presses it to her lips and ties it around the grill beside the others. Not once does she look at you. Her privacy is thin, and you try not to tear it by staring. No one can quite agree whether such shrine ribbons are offerings, pleas, vows, or charms wearing holy clothing. Pilgrims leave tokens for healing a wax leg for a lame one, a wax eye for sight, a tiny silver heart for grief or gratitude. Sailors hang rope, mothers leave swaddling cloth, soldiers leave broken spurs, but lovers leave stranger things, names folded into parchment, hair braided with thread, pins bent into crosses, coins pressed warm from the palm. A prayer may ask a saint for mercy. A charm may ask the world to obey. Here, in the rain, the difference becomes slippery. The young woman rises. For a moment she sways, as if standing has taken more courage than walking. Then she notices the dog and gives the smallest smile. He follows you, she asks. So he believes. That is a cleaner spell than most. Her voice is soft, hoarse from cold or crying. You ask whether she is on pilgrimage. She looks at St. Agnes, not at you. Only as far as a heart can go without permission. It is not a direct answer, but it is enough. In this world, hearts have guardians, fathers, husbands, priests, lords, money, fields, family bargains sealed over ale and witnessed by men who call it order. A ribbon tied in rain begins to seem less foolish when every honest road is blocked. Yet Brother Aldwin's words return to love that seeks to master his appetite wearing a ribbon. The young woman reaches into her basket and leaves an egg in the wooden dish beside the coins. A humble offering, smooth and pale. Eggs are given for fertility, for new beginnings, for households hoping spring remembers them. Some swear an egg passed through a flame and buried beneath a threshold can draw affection into a home. Others say it simply rots and teaches everyone patience. Medieval wisdom, like medieval roads, contains both mud and meaning. She crosses herself, steps out into the rain, and takes the eastward path without looking back. The blue ribbon trembles in the wind. You remain a little longer. Water ticks from the roof tiles. The candle flame leans, rights itself, leans again. You take the rosemary from your sleeve and hold it in your palm. You could leave it here, for memory, the herb wife said, or stew. Either use is respectable. Instead, you tuck it back carefully, unsure whether you keep it from devotion, caution, or the simple wish to carry something clean-smelling through a wet world. Before you leave, your eye catches the wax-sealed parchment beside the grill. The seal has softened in the damp, A corner has opened. You see one word written inside, not enough to read the whole plea, only a name perhaps, or a command, or a prayer mistaken for one. The uncertainty is what troubles you. Those who tell the tale never fully agree where hope ends and coercion begins, and standing in that little shrine with the rain running down the road, you understand why. The bell from the distant abbey reaches you once more, faint as breath under a door. You pull your cloak close, step back into the mud, and continue along the pilgrim road while the dog follows at your heel and the blue ribbon shivers behind you in the gathering dark. The road leads you away from the little shrine and into a country that seems made of wet hedges, tired fields, and the long grey breath of evening. Rain slips from the willow branches behind you. The blue ribbon fades from sight, though you keep seeing it in your mind, trembling against the shrine grill as if it still has something to say. The dog trots close to your ankle, occasionally pausing to sniff at cart ruts with grave scholarly interest. You suspect he's learning more from the road than most abbots learn from councils, though he has the advantage of not needing to write any of it down. Ahead, beyond a fold of pasture and a stand of bare ash trees, torchlight appears. It burns in pairs along a timber bridge, then along the outer wall of a small manor house set above the road. It is not a castle, though it would like passing strangers to think well of it. A ditch circles the yard. A wooden gatehouse leans over the entrance. Behind it rise steep roofs, a chapel gable, and a hall chimney pouring smoke into the rain-dark sky. The whole place smells, even from the road, of wet horses, oak fires, and stored grain. You reach the gate as a servant is closing it for the night. He has a wool cap pulled low, a lantern in one hand, and the guarded expression of a man who has been blamed for weather before. He looks at your muddy boots, your soaked cloak, and the dog. "Road's bad," he says. "It has ambitions to become a pond." That earns you half a smile. He lets you into the yard because travellers are sometimes received at manor houses, especially when the weather is foul and refusing shelter would look uncharitable before God, neighbours, and any gossiping servant with excellent memory. Hospitality in these places is both virtue and reputation must be fed nearly as often as horses. You cross the yard between stables and store sheds. Chickens huddle under a cart. A groom rubs down a chestnut mare with twists of straw, steam rising from the animal's back. Near the kitchen door, two girls carry wooden buckets, their sleeves tucked high, whispering as they move. One wears a string of blue beads at her wrist, not costly, but bright. Some swear blue beads turn away the evil eye, though others say they mainly prove that bead sellers understand anxiety. Either way, the girl touches them when thunder mutters far off beyond the fields. Inside the manor hall, the world becomes torchlit and close. The floor is strewn with fresh rushes mixed with sweet herbs, though beneath them the old damp smell remains, patient and unconquered. Long tables stand on trestles. A great hearth roars at one end, watched over by iron fire tongs, a spit, and a boy whose entire duty seems to be not falling asleep while something slowly becomes supper. Smoke gathers under the rafters among hanging shields, cured meats, and bunches of drying herbs. Dogs that actually belong here lie near the fire and regard your little follower with aristocratic suspicion. You're given a place near the lower end of the hall, not high enough to flatter you, not low enough to insult you. A servant brings ale, coarse bread, and a trencher softened with gravy from a stew of onions, beans, and a little mutton. At the high table, the lord of the manor sits in a fur-lined gown, speaking with a priest and a steward. His hands move as he talks rent, boundaries, winter fodder, a disputed acre, a tenant late with hens. Around him, the household breathes in quiet patterns. Servants pass, children are hushed. A greyhound sleeps with its nose on its paws. The rain taps at the shutters like a patient beggar. Then you notice her. She sits not beside the Lord, but slightly apart, near the hearth's amber edge, where the light warms her face and leaves the rest of her in shadow. She's dressed finely enough to belong here, a gown of deep green wool, a girdle with bronze fittings, a veil pinned neatly beneath a small fittings, a veil pinned neatly beneath a small circlet. Her cloak is lined with pale fur, soft and costly, but her hands are cold-looking where they rest in her lap. She is young, though not girlish, composed, though not peaceful. When the Lord laughs, she lowers her eyes. When the priest speaks of obedience and household order, her fingers close around something hidden beneath the fold of her cloak. You remember the shrine ribbon. You remember the saffron sleeve in the market. You remember Brother Aldwin saying that love which seeks to master is appetite wearing a ribbon. Yet what is this woman seeking mastery, mercy, or simply a room in her own life where her breath belongs to her? No one can quite agree whether noble marriages are grander than village marriages, or merely more expensive chains. Lands meet lands, debts soften, old quarrels are salted over. A daughter's hand may settle what swords and oaths have failed to settle, and everyone calls it harmony because the feasting is good. Perhaps this woman has come here from another manor with trunks, servants, dowry cloth, and instructions to smile. Perhaps she's learned the Lord's temper by listening for how doors close. Perhaps she's not been struck, not threatened, not openly wronged, and yet feels herself folded like parchment into an agreement made by other hands. A maid comes to refill your ale and follows your glance. "Lady Isolde," she whispers, too softly for anyone above the salt to hear. "Married before Advent." To him you ask, though the answer sits at the high table. The maid nods. Her father owed money. His lordship wanted the meadow by the mill. God arranged the rest. They say, God gets blamed for many contracts. You murmur. The maid's mouth tightens against a smile, then fear smooths it away. She is kind, she says. Too quiet. The cook says quiet women either pray deeply or think dangerously. Across the hall, Lady Isolde rises and moves toward the side passage, claiming perhaps the need for air, prayer, or a word with her woman. No one stops her. You find yourself standing too, not boldly, not rudely, but with the uncertain drift of a guest stretching his legs after supper. The dog follows. Subtlety is not among his gifts. In the passage beyond the hall, torchlight thins. The stones are colder here, the rushes sparser. A small wooden chest stands against the wall, bound with iron straps. Lady Isolde pauses beside a narrow window where rain glimmers black beyond the slit. She thinks herself alone. From beneath her fur-lined cloak, she draws a small token tied in linen, not a wax heart. Not exactly, but a round piece of pale cloth stitched with red thread around something hidden inside. A sprig of rosemary has been tucked into the knot, already bruised and dark. She presses it between both palms and whispers words you cannot catch. Some swear such tokens are made to sweeten a husband's speech, to cool anger, to turn a hard heart gently toward the hearth. Others say even a soft chain remains a chain. Even now, it is hard to tell whether her charm is a plea for kindness or an attempt to pull another will into shape. Her face in the torchlight is not wicked, it is tired. That is what troubles you most. She lifts the token to the little window, toward the rain and the hidden moon, then hides it again beneath the fur. When she turns and sees you, her eyes widen, not with guilt alone, but with the fear of someone who knows how little mercy the world keeps for women caught holding secret things. You bow your head as if you have seen nothing. The dog, mercifully for once, does not bark. Lady Isolde passes you in silence, carrying her token back into the brightness of the hall, where the Lord speaks of meadows, debts, and winter fodder, and the torches burn as though every shadow has been invited. You return to the hall after Lady Isolde, though you keep a slower pace, giving the shadow of her secret room to settle before you step again into torchlight. The warmth of the hearth strikes your face. The noise of the manor gathers around you, spoons against trenchers, dogs shifting in their sleep, servants moving between benches, the Lord's voice rolling on about hayricks and tenants, as if the whole world can be measured in rents and acreage. Lady Isolde is once more near the hearth, still as a painted saint, her hands folded over the place where the little token hides beneath fur and wool. No one looks at her closely, or perhaps everyone does and pretends not to. That is often how households survive. You sit again at the lower table and the dog slips beneath the bench, curling into a patch of dropped warmth. Your bread has gone hard at the edge, but you chew it anyway. Medieval meals, like medieval weather, do not improve because one has opinions. The maid who whispered Lady Isolde's name passes with a jug of ale and pauses only long enough to murmur, "If you seek a bed, the steward has set travellers in the old counting room, but the clerk is still there." "The clerk?" She tips her head toward a narrow door near the screen's passage. "Master Odo writes for the manor, writes for half the village too, if they bring coin, eggs, or flattery. He hears more sins than the priest and writes them neater. A scribe, then, not a monk, not Brother Aldwin with his ink-stained suspicion and careful Latin, but a working village writer-keeper of accounts, contracts, letters, petitions, dowry agreements, rent rolls, wills, and all the little marks that turn speech into something harder to deny. In a world where most hands know plough, spindle, bucket, and knife better than pen, the person who writes has a small, dangerous power. You finish your ale and drift toward the door. The manor hall remains behind you, breathing heat and smoke. The old counting room is colder, lit by 2 beeswax candles and 1 rushlight that smells faintly of tallow. Shelves line the wall, holding folded parchments, tally sticks, broken seals, and rolls tied with faded cord. A chest sits open beneath the table, stuffed with scraps too precious to waste. Parchment is not cheap. Each sheet once had legs and a warm hide, which is a thought no bedtime mind particularly needs. But the Middle Ages rarely asks whether its facts are cosy. Master Odo sits hunched over the table. He's thin, with a narrow beard, a wool cap, and eyes reddened by candle smoke. His fingers are stained black near the nails. Beside his elbow lie a penknife, a goose quill, a horn of ink, a little pot of sand, and a cake of beeswax used for seals. A half-burned candle leans in its holder, wax pooling like pale cream. He does not look up when you enter. "If you cannot pay, I cannot write," he says. "I'm only seeking the sleeping room." "Then you are early, or I am late." He scratches a line across the parchment. Both are common. Across from him stands a woman in a brown hood, hands hidden in her sleeves. Not Lady Isolde. Older. A village woman, perhaps, with mud on her hem and a basket at her feet. On the table before her lies a small bundle, a strip of linen, a red thread, a little wax heart no larger than a walnut, and something wrapped in a scrap of cloth. When she notices your gaze, she draws the cloth closer with 2 fingers. Master Odo finally looks up. His face shows irritation first, then calculation. You may wait by the wall, he says, and hear nothing. This instruction, in a room this small, has a hopeful quality. You move to the wall where a cloak hangs from an iron peg. The dog slips in and settles beside the chest, nose between paws. The woman keeps her eyes on the tabletop. Master Odo dips the quill, shakes it once, and begins to copy words from a worn scrap onto a cleaner piece of parchment. His lips move silently as he writes. The script is small and cramped, not the grand hand of a monastery gospel, but a practical hand made for keeping secrets affordable. The candle flame gutters. You catch fragments, not because you try too hard, but because the room gives them to you a name written twice, once plain and once backward, a plea for turning, the words by hearth, by breath, and by binding. There is a saint's name tucked among stranger syllables, as if holiness has been invited to sit beside something it may not approve of. No one can quite agree whether such mixtures are ignorance, desperation, or deliberate disguise. A holy name can bless bread, guard a cradle, calm a sickbed, written into a charm meant to bend another heart. It begins to feel like a stolen church bell rung for a private quarrel. The woman unwraps the cloth. Inside is a single dark curl of hair and a tiny stain on linen, rusty brown and dry. You look away before looking becomes accusation. Master Odo does not look away. He merely asks, his. She nods. And the mark. From my own thumb, she whispers. He makes a sound in his throat, neither approval nor disgust. Fresh is usually asked. I will not do it again. For that, at least, your senses awake. It is said almost kindly. He takes the red thread and lays it across the parchment, but does not tie it. Some swear the blood of the seeker binds the wish stronger than ink, he murmurs, more to the quill than to you or her. Some swear old women add such rules so frightened girls will pay twice. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, which is fortunate for trade. The woman flinches at the joke, and he softens his voice. Listen well, he says, this does not make love. She closes her eyes. It may give you courage to speak. It may give you folly to act. It may give you blame if others discover it. But it does not make love. Then why write it, she asks. Master Odo pauses, quill suspended. The beeswax candle hisses softly, and rain taps at the shutter. Because if I refuse, you go to someone worse, he says. That answer is not clean. It lies in the room like a damp cloak. Even now, it is hard to tell whether he is a sinner, a coward, a tradesman, or a man trying to keep darker hands away from foolish hearts. Perhaps he is all four before supper. He folds the parchment into a small square, seals it with softened beeswax, and presses the flat of his knife handle into the seal. No noble crest, no holy mark, only a plain dent. He wraps the hair and linen separately and pushes them back toward the woman. Do not put this under his pillow, he says. She looks startled, but they said. They say many things. Put nothing in food, drink, bed, or clothing. If you carry this, carry it yourself. If you speak, speak with your own mouth. If he says no, hear him. The woman takes the packet with trembling hands. You sound like the priest. I charge less. It is the smallest joke, dry as old straw, and it nearly breaks your heart because the woman almost smiles. She leaves by the side door, clutching the sealed parchment in her fist. The rain swallows her steps. Master Odo sits very still after she goes. Then he takes the penknife and scrapes a blot from the table, though there is no blot there. You think of Lady Isolde's hidden token, the shrine ribbon, the herb wife's wax shapes, Brother Aldwin's stern warning, Each place has shown you another face of the same darkness, not thunder, not fire, not monsters at the window, but ordinary people reaching for small forbidden tools because ordinary life has given them so few honest ones. Master Odo blows out the rushlight. "The sleeping room is through there," he says, pointing to a low doorway. "Mind the chest. It bites shins." You step past him with the dog at your heel. Behind you, the half-burned beeswax candle gutters once more, and for a breath its flame makes the sealed parchments shine like tiny trapped moons. You sleep in the old counting room beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of smoke, mice, and somebody else's winter. The pallets are laid close to the wall, near a chest that does indeed bite shins if approached without reverence. Once in the night, you wake to hear rain ticking against the shutter and Master Odo coughing softly in the next room. Once again, nearer dawn, you hear Lady Isolde's hall voice in the distance, calm and low, followed by the deeper murmur of the Lord. Nothing in the manor breaks open, no one cries out, no bells of judgment ring. The world merely turns in its dark, slow way. By morning the rain has hardened into frost. You leave after a plain breakfast of yesterday's bread warmed near the hearth, small ale, and a spoonful of soft cheese that a servant insists is better than it looks. She's right, though the contest is not difficult. The manor yard glitters beneath a thin white crust. The chickens step cautiously as if the ground has betrayed them personally. A groom pours warm mash for the horses, and steam rises from the bucket in fragrant clouds of oats and bran. Near the gate, a boy scatters ashes on the slick stones, a practical habit in winter, and also, some swear, a way to keep ill luck from crossing thresholds. Others say people simply prefer not to fall and crack their skulls before prime, which is also a respectable belief. You pass out beneath the timber gate, the dog at your side, and the manor settles behind you into smoke, labour, and secrets. The road ahead enters a strip of woodland beyond the lower fields, where frost whitens the hedges and every twig carries a bead of pale light. Your boots crunch softly. The air smells of cold bark, wet leaves, and distant charcoal smoke. Rooks lift from a field as you pass, black wings beating the dawn into motion. Somewhere far off, a church bell rings, thinner than the abbey bell, and its sound drifts between the trees like a thread pulled through linen. The forest road is not wild in the way songs describe wildness. It is used, watched, and worried over. Men cut coppiced hazel here, women gather fallen branches, swine root in the leaf mould when allowed by the Lord's rites, and children are sent to collect kindling, though never gladly after dark. Still, trees change a road. Sounds become nearer and stranger. A squirrel in the brush can seem like a footstep. A hanging crow can seem like an omen. A bent branch can look, if your stomach is empty enough, like a hand inviting you the wrong way. You follow cart ruts hardened by frost until the road narrows into a track beside a frozen ditch. Red cloth is tied to a thorn bush there, stiff with ice. A little bundle of feathers hangs from a low branch, turning in the wind. You stop without meaning to. Some swear such feather bundles mark snares. Some swear they ward off fever. Some swear they are left by those who know how to speak with night birds, which seems a difficult conversation for everyone involved. No one can quite agree whether the wise woman who lives beyond this bend heals more people than she frightens. But the directions given by the manor kitchen maid were clear. Follow the ditch until the broken beach, then listen for bells that are not church bells. You hear them after another 100 paces. Not great bronze bells, not even handbells from a chapel, but tiny sheep bells strung from the eaves of a low cottage tucked between two leaning oaks. They stir in the wind with a soft, uneven chiming. The cottage roof is thatched, patched with moss, and the walls are wattle and daub, smoke seeping through a hole where the chimney ought to have more discipline. Bundles of herbs hang beneath the eaves: sage, rue, mugwort, yarrow, lavender, and things dried beyond naming. A stack of split wood leans by the door. A clay pot sits upside down on a stake, painted with a crude eye. The dog stops at the edge of the yard and sneezes. "Polite of you to announce yourself," says a voice from within. The door opens before you knock. The wise woman stands there with a spindle in one hand and wool caught around her fingers. She's smaller than rumour deserves, wrapped in layers of brown and dark teal, with a linen coif beneath a hood and a face as creased as a winter apple. Her eyes are bright, not kindly exactly, but awake. Around her neck hangs a little wooden cross, a pierced coin, and a blue glass bead strung together on the same cord. If Brother Aldwin saw it, he might write a sermon. If the herb wife saw it, she might ask the price. "You came from the manor," she says. "I did. And before that, the town. And before that, rain." That last part followed everyone. She snorts and steps aside, or come in before your feet become relics. Inside, the cottage is close and warm. Smoke stains the rafters black. Rushes cover the packed earth floor, mixed with dried thyme that releases a sharp scent when you step on it. A small hearth burns low. Above it hangs an iron pot, and beside it sit wooden bowls, a bundle of clean linen strips, a jar of honey, a bowl of onions, a little heap of dried mushrooms, and a row of clay cups. There are no skulls, no thunderclouds trapped in jars, no dramatic ravens quoting Latin. Mostly there is housework, which is the true old magic and far less appreciated. She points you to a stool. Sit. The dog may sit too if he does not judge. The dog immediately sits. The wise woman pours warm nettle tea into a cup and hands it to you. It tastes green, bitter, and alive. She watches your face with amusement. Good. You suffer honestly. You ask whether people come to her for love charms. People come to me for everything they cannot say aloud elsewhere. She returns to her spindle, drawing wool into thread with slow, practiced fingers. Love, teeth, milk that will not rise, men who drink, women who weep, children with coughs, cows that dry early, dreams of dead mothers, warts shaped like bishops. A wart shaped like a bishop is still a wart, but try telling that to the frightened. On the table lies a length of red thread knotted 3 times around a sprig of rosemary. Beside it rests a strip of parchment marked with a cross, then a name, then words too cramped to read. A candle stub, pale beeswax, has been pressed flat at the base. You look at it, then at her. She follows your gaze. That one is not for binding a heart. It is for unbinding a tongue. A tongue. A girl cannot speak before her father. She shakes like a hare. So she carries rosemary for memory, red thread for courage, and St. Catherine's name because learned women deserve allies. The wise woman twists the spindle. Will it make her brave? No. Will she believe she can be brave long enough to begin, perhaps? There is medicine in perhaps. Brother Aldwin would not like that, or perhaps, troublingly, he might understand it. She shows you other things, not with pride, but with the impatience of someone tired of being misunderstood by people who prefer simple fears. Mugwort sewn into a pillow for uneasy dreams, a charm against nosebleeds written with holy words and tied to the arm, honey and sage for sore throats, a snail rubbed on warts, then hung on a thorn until the wart fades, a practice so unpleasantly specific that you almost believe it out of respect. Some swear the wart dies with the snail. Others swear the person simply stops looking so closely. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Then, from a small wooden box, she takes 3 cords, white, black, and red. Moonlit knots, she says, are old. Sailors tie winds in knots. Mothers tie protection into swaddling. Lovers tie vows into ribbons. Enemies tie curses, or claim they do. The knot is only a knot until someone fears it, trusts it, or hides it beneath another person's bed. And the dark ones, you ask? Her fingers still. The dark ones are not dark because of herbs, she says, nor wax, nor words. They are dark when they refuse another soul its door. She closes the box. Any charm that cannot bear daylight should be asked why. Outside, the sheep bells tremble under the eaves. Frost brightens the tiny yard. The dog rests his chin on his paws, wholly unconcerned with theology, folklore, or the ethics of red thread. The wise woman gives you a twist of dry time for the road. For breath, she says. Yours, not anyone else's. Keep ownership clear. You step back into the cold with the time in your palm and smoke in your cloak. Behind you. The cottage door closes softly, and the little bells continue chiming in the trees, neither holy nor wicked, only small and strange in the winter air. The frost lingers through the morning, whitening the ruts and hedgerows until the whole countryside seems dusted with flour. You leave the wise woman's cottage with time in your pocket, rosemary in your sleeve, and more uncertainty than answers, which is perhaps the most authentic medieval souvenir possible. The little sheep bells under her eaves go on chiming behind you for a while, fading in and out with the wind. The dog trots ahead now and then doubles back to be certain you still exist. It is a practical arrangement. In a world of manor lords, suspicious monks, rain-soaked shrines, and women hiding charms beneath fur-lined cloaks, it is comforting to be trusted without ceremony by a creature who requires only crumbs and continued movement. The road broadens by noon and joins a lane bordered with naked hedges and half-frozen puddles. Smoke rises from clustered cottages ahead. A smith's hammer rings, slow and regular. Beyond the cottages stands the manor court barn, recognizable by its larger doors, the trampled yard, and the little group of villagers already gathered outside with the resigned posture of people expecting inconvenience. A cock struts through the muck with far more confidence than anyone summoned to a court has any right to feel. You had not intended to stop, but the road runs directly past the yard, and medieval institutions have a talent for making themselves everyone's business. A reeve in a dark wool mantle stands near the entrance with a wax tablet and a face arranged into public seriousness. Beside him a servant ties horses to a rail. A cart leans by the gate, one wheel rimmed in frozen mud, and against it sits a woman with a child wrapped to her back. The child sucks 2 fingers and stares at everything with that wide solemnity only children and saints in painted panels truly manage. "Court day," says an old man near the fence, "not because you asked, but because saying it aloud improves nothing and yet people do it anyway." He wears a patched brown cloak and carries a basket containing eggs cushioned in straw. His nose is red from cold. Land dispute, you ask? He snorts, always. Hens, ditches, grazing, broken fences, unpaid rents, and who borrowed whose pot and returned it with less pot than before. He leans a little closer, but today there is charm talk. That phrase moves through the yard like a draught under a door. Charm talk, less than accusation, more than rumour. Inside the court barn, benches line the walls. At the far end, Beneath a hanging lantern and a rough wooden cross sits the steward in a fur-lined cap with the priest on one side and the reeve on the other. A clerk scratches on parchment with an expression suggesting that human behaviour is a tiring genre. Villagers fill the room in knots of wool, mud, and guarded faces. The dog lies against your ankle and sighs as if legal procedure has disappointed him already. On one bench sit two young men avoiding each other's eyes. On another, three women whisper over folded hands. At the front stands a broad-shouldered farmer named, you soon gather, Martin, whose jaw has set so hard it might snap a spoon. Beside him is his wife, Beatrice, thin and pale, her kerchief neat despite the cold. Opposite them stands another woman, Isabel, a widow in dark blue with a basket at her feet and an expression too carefully blank to be natural. No one can quite agree. You learn by listening whether this hearing begins with love, jealousy, or a milk cow that stopped giving properly after Michaelmas. Such is the charm of village justice, every matter arrives braided. The steward calls for quiet. Martin speaks first. He says Isabel has bewitched his household, that since harvest his wife has taken sick with sleeplessness and tears. His cow has gone wrong, and he himself has felt no rest in bed or peace at board. He says a wax shape was found beneath the threshold stone, wrapped with thread and pinned through. He says his wife has been drawn away in affection, which sounds both dramatic and vaguely furniture-related. The villagers murmur. Beatrice stares at the floor. Isabel answers in a low, steady voice. She sold Beatrice a sleeping herb mixture of poppy, lavender, and honey, nothing more. The wax shape, she says, could have come from any child playing or any fool hoping to cause fear. She lifts her chin at Martin when she says fear, and you can almost hear the word land. The priest clears his throat. The steward asks whether there was prior quarrel between households. Here the room comes alive. There always was. A missing hen in Lent, a borrowed rake not returned, a boundary line disputed near the stream, Martin's brother once courting Isabel's niece and then marrying elsewhere. Some swear Martin drank too much at harvest feast and insulted her late husband's memory. Others say Beatrice visited Isabel twice by dusk and paid with eggs. A child claims to have seen red thread in Martin's doorway. Another swears the child also once claimed to see St. Margaret in a puddle, which weakens his authority somewhat. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and in the manor court this is not a flaw but the central architecture. The clerk writes everything. You watch Beatrice. Her hands twist in her apron. When the steward asks whether she sought help from Isabel, she hesitates so long that the silence itself becomes testimony. At first only for sleep, she says, and after, her mouth works once before words come, after for my husband's temper. The room shifts. Martin turns toward her in shock, then anger, then something smaller and more wounded. The priest closes his eyes briefly as if hoping prayer might become earplugs. Beatrice speaks faster now, as frightened people do once the dam breaks. Martin had grown harsh, she says. Not striking, no, but sharp, suspicious, restless. Harvest was poor, rent was due, he drank more. Their bed was cold in every sense. She asked Isabel for something to soften him, only let him speak kindly again when he came through the door with frost on his boots and grievance in his mouth. Isabel nods once. I gave lavender for the bedding, rosemary and ale for remembrance, and counsel to speak plain. Martin laughs once, bitter and short, and the wax. Isabel's face hardens. Not from me. Some swear widows know more dangerous things than wives, because they have already survived one household, and no longer believe men are the centre of divine order. Some swear that is precisely why people fear them. A woman living without a husband makes others nervous enough. A woman who knows herbs, sleeps alone, and is not easily bullied becomes a ready vessel for every village dread. The steward asks whether anyone saw Isabel place a charm beneath the threshold. No one did. Whether anyone can prove the wax shape was meant for malice. No one can. Whether Beatrice paid for a binding charm. Beatrice says no, weeping now, and insists she wanted only gentleness, only peace. Even now, it's hard to tell whether her hope was innocent, whether her fear made her credulous, or whether everyone here is using the language of charms to avoid naming the ordinary cruelty of marriage under pressure. The priest finally speaks. He warns against superstition, unlawful remedies, and those practices whereby trust in God is exchanged for hidden workings. He looks at Isabel while saying it, but not only at her. He looks at the whole room, and perhaps at the age itself. The steward fines Martin and Beatrice for disturbing the court with an unproven accusation, though lightly. He warns Isabel not to sell remedies beyond common herbs without priestly knowledge, a condition impossible enough to sound authoritative. The wax shape is ordered burned. The threshold is to be blessed. Martin and Beatrice are told to reconcile, as if reconciliation were a bucket one could simply fetch. The villagers leave with a disappointed hum of people denied a cleaner scandal. Outside, the frost has begun to soften into mud. Martin walks ahead alone. Beatrice lingers by the fence, pressing a kerchief to her eyes. Isabel lifts her basket and passes her without a word. Yet as she goes by, she drops something into Beatrice's hand, perhaps rosemary, perhaps only a scrap of cloth. You cannot see. The dog rises. The court doors stand open behind you, letting out the smell of damp wool, ink, and judgment. You step back onto the road, feeling the strange weariness of witnessing how quickly sorrow becomes suspicion, and how often charm talk is simply another name for everything a village cannot bear to say plainly. You leave the manor courtyard with the taste of damp judgment still in the air. Behind you, the villagers break apart into lanes and fields, carrying their versions of the hearing like covered pots, each one warm with something different inside. Martin strides toward his cottage without looking back. Beatrice walks slower, one hand closed around whatever Isabel has placed there. The priest crosses the yard with his cloak gathered high, avoiding mud as carefully as scandal, and the clerk tucks his parchments beneath his arm, already preserving half-truths more neatly than anyone lived them. The road turns north by a line of pollarded willows. Frost melts from the hedges and becomes a bright dripping, and the ground softens underfoot until every step makes that small sucking sound by which medieval roads remind travellers they are guests, not masters. The dog runs ahead, finds something invisible and important in the ditch, then returns with a face of such innocent satisfaction that you decide not to ask questions. Above the fields, rooks wheel in black scribbles against a pale sky. Somewhere behind you, the bell from the village church rings for a late morning office, thinner and less patient than the abbey bell, but still steady enough to draw the day onward. By afternoon, the land rises, the cottages fall behind, and the road climbs between stony pastures where sheep crop at winter grass with the air of monks engaged in difficult reading. A small keep appears on the ridge square, grey and blunt, with a timber palisade, a ditch, and a watch platform that looks colder than any human ambition should require. It is not the sort of castle sung about by minstrels with embroidered sleeves. It is a practical place, built to store grain, shelter men-at-arms, and make neighbouring villages remember who collects the rents. Still, in the lowering light, with torches beginning to bloom along the gate. It has a stern beauty. A cart blocks the entrance. 2 men argue over a sack of oats split along one seam, spilling grain into the mud while a third man tries to scoop it back with his hands. This is less heroic than a siege, but likely more common. A guard in a padded jack waves you to wait, then gives up when the dog slips under the cart and sends a chicken shrieking from the shadows. The whole gate briefly becomes a military crisis involving poultry. "Whose dog?" the guard demands. You look down at the creature now standing proudly beside you. He keeps his own counsel. The guard grunts, like knights, then, in with you. Inside the yard, the keep breathes the ordinary life behind martial stories. A boy carries arrows in a bundle. A farrier files a horse's hoof near the stable. A woman in a dark red gown counts loaves by the bakehouse door. Squires scrub mud from saddles with straw, and one small page struggles to carry a helm nearly as large as his confidence. Near the well, 2 men practice with blunted swords, their movements slow, tired, and more concerned with not slipping than with glory. No one can quite agree whether young warriors learn courage first or bruises first. Watching them, you suspect bruises are the more reliable teachers. You're given leave to warm yourself in the lower hall because the road is long and the evening sharp. The hall is narrow, with stone walls hung in places by old wool cloth to keep out draughts. The floor is strewn with rushes, and the hearth burns fiercely enough to make shadows jump against the rafters. Supper has not yet been served, but a servant hands you small ale and a piece of coarse bread rubbed with garlic. It is simple, hot at the edges, and good enough to make your tired body stop complaining for several blessed breaths. At the side of the hearth stands a young knight, or almost one. He wears a mail shirt loosened at the neck, a blue surcoat stained near the hem, and a sword belt polished more from anxious handling than from age. His face is smooth except for a narrow line of beard he seems very hopeful about. He's listening to an older man speak, but not hearing him. His eyes keep dropping to his own left wrist, where something pale is tied beneath the cuff. The older man, broad and scarred, follows the glance and sighs. "Take it off, Ewan." The young knight's hand closes over his sleeve. No, it is cloth. It was hers. It was stolen. That word lands quietly, but you hear it from your place near the lower bench. The dog hears nothing of moral weight and merely begins licking garlic crumbs from the floor. The older man notices you listening and gives you the brief look soldiers give travellers measuring whether you are threat, nuisance, or furniture. Apparently you are furniture. He turns back to the young knight. "You cannot wear a stolen favour into the Lord's service and call it honour." "I do not wear it for honour," Ewan says. "For what, then?" The young man looks toward the hall door, where dusk deepens beyond the yard. Protection. Some swear a lady's favour tied to sleeve or helm can guard a man in battle, not by steel but by memory. A ribbon, a glove, a strip of veil, a braid of thread, these things travel in songs as tokens of pure devotion, fluttering nobly above tournaments and fields. Yet songs rarely ask whether the lady gave the token freely, whether she wanted her name carried into danger, whether a man can steal cloth and declare it destiny. The world enjoys a romantic banner, especially when it does not have to do the washing afterward. The older man lowers his voice. From what? Ewan's answer is nearly a whisper. From forgetting her, from being turned, from the charm they say was made against me. The hearth pops. A servant crossing the hall slows just slightly, then continues. You think of wax hearts in the market, a blue ribbon in rain, parchment sealed by beeswax, the wise woman's warning that any charm unable to bear daylight should be asked why. The older man rubs his brow. No one has made a charm against you. Her brother hates me. Her brother hates everyone with working lungs. They found thread beneath my saddle. They found thread in a stable. This is not sorcery. This is stable life. Ewan's face tightens. He is young enough that fear still disguises itself as certainty. He tells the older man, and everyone close enough to hear, that the girl loved him first, before her family promised her to a merchant's son. He says she dropped the ribbon during Mass at Candlemas. He picked it up. He meant to return it. Then he heard she had wept. Then he heard her mother had taken her to an herb wife. Then he heard her brother swore Ewan had bewitched her. Then he heard from a boy who heard from a groom who heard from someone near the bakehouse that a binding charm had been made to turn him cold. Gossip again, riding faster than any horse. So you kept the ribbon, the older man says. So I would remember what was true, or so you would not have to ask what was true. The young knight looks as if he has been struck, though no hand has moved. For a moment, the hall seems to dim around him. Even now, it is hard to tell whether love guides him, or pride, or fear wearing borrowed colours. He is not cruel in the way of villains from sharp-edged tales. He is simply frightened that his own heart may not be a castle. So he ties cloth around it and calls the knot protection. The older man holds out his hand. Return it. Ewan does not move. Outside, a horn sounds from the gate, low and brief. Supper will begin soon. Men come in from the yard smelling of horse, rain, and cold iron. A servant sets trenchers on the tables. Someone carries in smoked fish, onions, and a pot of beans thickened with barley. The keep fills with the humble machinery of evening, and still the young knight stands before the hearth with his fist around a ribbon that may be blessing, theft, memory, or chain. At last he unties it. He does it clumsily, as if the knot has grown into his skin. The cloth is pale yellow, embroidered along one edge with tiny green stitches. It is beautiful in the fragile way small handmade things are beautiful, because someone spent time on it without knowing where it would end. Ewan places it in the older man's palm and looks away. Will you give it back, he asks. If she wants it, the older man says. Not because you need an answer shaped for you. The young knight nods once, miserable and relieved together. You warm your hands by the hearth and watch the ribbon vanish into the older man's pouch. The dog leans against your boot. The bell from the little chapel inside the keep begins to ring for evening prayer, and its sound climbs the cold stone walls while the torches flicker. The trenchers are filled, and another stolen charm is made, perhaps a little less powerful by being brought into the light. Supper in the keep comes with the solemn generosity of places that have more duty than luxury. You sit along the lower table beneath a hanging cloth that tries, without much success, to keep the draught from sliding down the wall. Trenchers are set before you, thick slabs of old bread ready to catch bean broth, onion gravy, and the oil from smoked fish. The young knight Ewan eats little. The older man, who has taken the stolen ribbon, eats with the steady discipline of someone who believes feeling should wait until after salt has been passed. Around them, men-at-arms, servants, grooms, and pages make the hall warm with bodies, steam, and the quiet clatter of wooden spoons. The dog performs his evening duties beneath the table, accepting fallen crumbs with priestly seriousness. The chapel bell rings once after the meal, and the sound travels through stone like a memory trying to find a room. Torches gutter. A servant lifts the used trenchers into a basket, some to be given later to the poor, some to the dogs, some perhaps to pigs if judgment proves flexible. Nothing is wasted here if it can still be chewed, burned, patched, or blamed on someone else. When the hall begins to settle, you're not sent to a fine guest chamber, because this is not that sort of keep, and you are not that sort of guest. Instead, a kitchen boy with ears reddened by cold leads you through a side passage to a winter storehouse built against the inner wall. Warmer than the stable, he says. This is true in the way a stone is warmer than another stone if one has been briefly insulted by sunlight. The storehouse door is oak, banded with iron, and opened with a key as long as your hand. Inside, the air is cold and rich with stored life. Smoked fish hang from beams in neat rows, stiff and silver brown. Hams wrapped in linen swing near bunches of dried herbs. Sacks of barley, oats, peas, and flour line the walls. Turnips sit in straw-filled bins. Wheels of hard cheese rest on shelves beside jars sealed with wax. Apples, wrinkled but still fragrant, lie in shallow crates. And wool blankets are piled on a bench near the far wall. A tallow lamp burns low in a niche, giving off more smell than light. You're given one of the blankets, rough but blessedly dry, and a place near the sacks of oats. The dog circles on a patch of straw, then collapses with a sigh that seems to judge the day as long but acceptable. You sit with your back to the wall, letting the storehouse silence gather around you. Outside, the keep settles into night. A guard calls from the wall. A horse stamps in the stable. Someone laughs once near the kitchen yard, and then the sound fades. You are not alone for long. Servants come and go, not loudly, but with the familiarity of people who know which boards complain and which latch can be lifted without waking the steward's temper. First comes the maid from the bakehouse, carrying a basket of leftover bread. Then a groom, sent for oats. Then the kitchen boy returns with a small cup of warmed ale, which he claims is for you, though he drinks half before remembering hospitality. Last comes an older woman with a white apron and a ring of keys at her belt. She checks the shelves, counts jars with her finger, and mutters numbers under her breath as if speaking to invisible creditors. The bakehouse maid notices the dog and smiles. He has a charm of his own, she says, follows without being called. That may be hunger, says the groom. Hunger is the oldest charm, the older woman replies, still counting jars. They all grow quiet for a moment after that, but not awkwardly. The storehouse invites quieter speech. Perhaps it is the hanging fish, the sealed jars, the bins of roots meant to keep bodies alive until spring. Winter makes everyone more honest, or at least too tired to decorate every fear. The kitchen boy, whose name appears to be Tom, pulls from his sleeve a little knot of black thread tied around a chicken bone. The older woman turns slowly, Thomas. He freezes. That had better not be from the good broth. It was already bare, he says quickly. Mostly. The groom laughs under his breath. The older woman reaches for it, and Tom reluctantly places it in her palm, for what she asks. For dice, he mumbles. For winning. For not losing too badly. She snorts. Then it is failing. Some swear a bone from a black hen can bring luck in games, especially if carried near the left wrist and never shown to a red-haired man. No one can quite agree why the red-haired man has been given such responsibility, but old rules often arrive with confidence and no explanation. The older woman gives the bone back, though she makes him promise not to steal from supper pots again unless he wants to charm himself into hunger. Then the groom, perhaps warmed by the joke, admits he carries a sprig of rowan in his boot when travelling with horses. Rowan, he says, keeps malicious eyes from souring the animals. A farrier told him so. The bakehouse maid says she keeps a pinch of salt sewn into her hem against betrayal. because her sister swore it stopped a man from lying under her window. The older woman says salt mostly stops meat from spoiling, and if it stopped men from lying, there would be no need for courts, priests, or mothers. They laugh softly, and the sound does not disturb the storehouse, it warms it. One by one, the small confessions come, not grand magic, not wax hearts sealed with blood, not names written backward by candlelight. These are humbler charms, carried by people with little privacy and less command over their days. A ribbon from a mother's sleeve tied around a wrist before service in a strange household. A hazelnut kept in a pocket to ward off toothache. A scrap from a wedding veil tucked under bedding for good marriage luck. A blue bead against envy. A coin bent slightly and promised to a saint if a sweetheart returned safely from market. A bit of dried thyme, like the one in your pocket, carried for courage of breath. Some swear these things work. Some swear they only remind the frightened to endure another day. Even now, it is hard to tell whether comfort becomes magic because the world is cruel, or whether magic becomes comfort because the heart refuses to sit empty-handed in the dark. The bakehouse maid speaks last, her voice lower than before. My mother tied red thread around my wrist when I came here. She said it would keep bad marriage luck away until I had coin enough to choose better. She twists her bare wrist now. Thread broke before midsummer. Then tie another, says the older woman. I have none from home. The storehouse grows still. Outside, wind presses against the oak door. You think of Lady Isolda's token, Beatrice's closed hand, the young knight's stolen ribbon. You think of how often love charms gather around people who are not trying to conquer kingdoms, only survive kitchens, contracts, cold beds, and promises made over their heads. The older woman reaches into the pocket of her apron and draws out a short length of red wool thread. She tosses it to the maid. There. But understand me, it will not choose a husband for you. The maid catches it. What will it do? Remind you not to let fools choose one quietly. That answer seems to satisfy everyone more than a spell would. You lie back on the straw with a rough blanket drawn to your chin. The smoked fish sways slightly above you. The lamp burns low. The dog dreams, paws twitching, perhaps chasing a goose through some kinder court. Around you, the servants finish their work and drift away one by one, carrying their salt, beads, threads, bones, and practical little hopes back into the cold corridors of the keep. Before dawn, the keep is awake in fragments. A guard coughs on the wall. A horse knocks its hoof against a stall board. Somewhere near the kitchen, Tom the kitchen boy drops something metal and whispers a prayer that sounds less devotional than strategic. You rise from the storehouse straw with oat dust on your sleeve, smoke in your cloak, and the faint imprint of a wool blanket across one cheek. The dog stretches, yawns, and looks ready to continue his work of following you without explanation. You leave after a breakfast of warm ale, coarse bread, and onion broth handed out by the older woman with the keyring. She gives the dog a crust and gives you a look that says crusts are not to be wasted on philosophy. Outside, young Ewan stands near the gate with the older man who took the stolen ribbon. You hear no words, only see the ribbon's absence at his wrist. A small emptiness where fear had tied itself. The road carries you south again, downhill from the keep and back toward Abbey lands. Frost lies in the ditches, but the middle of the road has softened under wheels and hooves. Your boots gather mud. A woman passes with 2 geese under her arms. The Abbey bell reaches you before the walls do, a slow bronze note moving through the mist, calling travellers to remember that even hunger and mud must sometimes pause for God. By mid-morning, you see the monastery again, stone walls, crows, chimney smoke rising straight in the cold air. Pilgrims wait near the gate. Some carry staffs. Some wear scallop shells or pewter badges on their hats. A man with a bandaged knee leans on his wife's arm. A mother holds a child wrapped tight in brown wool. Their breath clouds together, and their faces carry patience, hope, suspicion, and sore feet. You enter with them, the dog slipping between ankles like a small brown rumour. The lay brother from before carries a bucket of water. He notices you and grunts in recognition. "Relic day," he says. "Is that a feast?" "Depends on the relic." In the guest house, the rushes have been turned, the benches straightened, and the hearth coaxed into smoky life. Near the chapel passage, Brother Aldwyn stands with the expression of a man who has slept badly beside other people's foolishness. The same half-burned beeswax candle from before waits on the table, its side collapsed in a pale ridge. Beside it rests a small reliquary wrapped in embroidered cloth. It is no larger than a loaf, made of dark wood with little gilt plates tacked along the edges. One plate has loosened, as if even sanctity has maintenance problems. No one can quite agree whose relic is inside. The abbey calls it a finger bone of St. Agnes, protector of purity and young women. A pilgrim whispers that his cousin heard it was St. Valentine's knuckle, better for troubled lovers and winter marriages. Another says it is only a scrap of veil touched to a martyr's tomb. The monks, wisely, do not invite discussion. The relic is placed on a linen cloth. Pilgrims step forward one by one. Some kiss the reliquary, some touch it with rosaries, ribbons, kerchiefs, or little wax hearts shaped as offerings. A woman presses blue cloth to the wood, then folds it into a sleeve. A man lays down a coin and murmurs his daughter's name. The mother with the child touches the child's cap to the gilt edge. Brother Aldwyn watches with his lips pressed thin. The sight is tender. It is also troubling. You think of the shrine ribbons in the rain, the token beneath Lady Isolde's cloak, the sealed parchment Master Odo folded by candlelight. Here, in full daylight, under monastic eyes, people still bring names, cloth, wax, longing, and fear. They still press hope into objects. They still ask unseen powers to soften another's fate. The difference is that here the bells ring openly, the linen is clean, and the monk has written the proper words. Some swear a relic cures fever, eases childbirth, mends hearts, guards travellers, and turns wolves from the road. Some swear false relics multiply faster than rabbits behind monastery walls, and that if all the fingers of all the saints were counted together, heaven would appear to have been built by octopuses. You do not say this aloud. It feels unwise, and Brother Aldwyn already looks tired. When your turn comes, you do not kiss the reliquary. You only stand near it. The wood smells of incense, old cloth, and beeswax. The dog sits beside your foot, solemn as a tiny parish official. Brother Aldwyn leans closer. You have seen enough charms now to notice the resemblance. I have, and yet people defend one and condemn the other. Do you... He looks at the pilgrims. A young wife presses a folded paper against a reliquary, eyes closed. Her lips move around a husband's name, or perhaps a prayer for peace in a house where love is complicated. I defend what asks mercy, he says. I condemn what commands possession. That is a narrow line. It is. His voice is quiet, and crossed more often than we admit. The candle beside the relic gutters, though there is no strong draught. Wax slides down its side and hardens. Brother Aldwyn shields it with his palm. His ink-stained fingers tremble slightly, whether from cold, anger, or grief you cannot tell. He tells you that yesterday a woman left a charm in the chapel porch red thread, a name, and a request that a certain man be made faithful, not guided, not healed, made. The words were written beneath a saint's name. Brother Aldwyn burned it before prime, but kept the half-burned candle from beside it because, he says, he does not know whether it witnessed sin, sorrow, or both. Even now, it is hard to tell whether devotion and forbidden desire are neighbours, cousins, or the same traveller wearing different cloaks at different gates. A pilgrim leaves a wax heart before a saint, and everyone nods. A woman warms a wax heart by a cottage hearth, and everyone whispers. Perhaps the difference matters deeply because the heart must be free even when it begs for help. Perhaps people cling to objects because flesh is frail, memory fades, and words vanish into smoke unless tied to something the hand can hold. The relic ceremony ends with a chant from the chapel. The sound rises plain and low, filling the guest house stones with a hush that even the dog respects. Brother Aldwyn lifts the reliquary and carries it back toward the inner door. As he passes the half-burned candle, its flame steadies, small and gold. No proof of anything, only light doing what light does. You remain by the hearth after the pilgrims leave. On the table, someone has forgotten a pewter badge shaped like a tiny lamb. You turn it once between your fingers, then set it beside the candle where it can be found. Outside, the abbey bell begins again, and the sound follows you before you step back toward the road. You do not go far from the abbey that day. The winter light is already thinning by the time you leave the guest-house hearth, and the road beyond the monastery wall has the wet shine of a thing that means to freeze again before morning. A farmer's boy points you toward a hayloft outside the village, where travellers sometimes sleep if they do not mind sharing warmth with mice, tools, and the faint perfume of honest animals. By now, that sounds nearly luxurious. Medieval comfort is mostly a matter of lowering expectations until dry hay feels like a royal mattress. So you sleep above a bier, wrapped in your cloak, with the dog curled behind your knees and the abbey bells sounding through dreams. Once in the night, you wake to hear cattle shifting below, their warm breath rising through the boards. Once you hear a fox cry in the fields, thin and sharp, and some half-awake corner of your mind remembers the old belief that fox calls near a barn warn of deceit on the road. No one can quite agree whether foxes warn anyone of anything or merely enjoy making people uncomfortable at inconvenient hours. Dawn comes pale and brittle. The sky above the fields is the colour of old pewter, and frost rims every grass blade along the lane. You climb down from the hayloft with straw in your sleeves and stiffness in every joint. The farmer's wife gives you a cup of small ale and a heel of bread spread with dripping, not because she knows you, but because sending a cold traveller into a cold morning empty-handed invites bad luck. Or so she says. It may also be kindness with a practical hat on. You thank her and take the road. The dog trots ahead, then stops at a bend where the lane drops toward a little stone bridge. There, half across the way, a merchant's cart has settled into trouble. One wheel leans at a sorrowful angle. The axle has slipped from its pin, and the cart bed has tilted enough to spill bundles into the frosted mud. A small brown mule stands in the traces, ears flat, looking deeply offended by engineering as a whole. Beside the cart, a round man in a dark green cloak kneels with both hands in the mud, trying to gather his goods while also cursing softly enough that nearby saints might pretend not to hear. He looks up when he sees you. You there, can you lift? Some things, you say. Good, lift the back, not the side. The side is how we arrived at this education. You set down your bundle and step into the ditch edge, boots breaking the frost. Together you try to raise the cart bed while he shoves a block of wood beneath the axle. The mule contributes by sighing heavily. The dog sniffs the scattered goods and is told, by everyone present, to reconsider his life choices. The merchant's name, he tells you between grunts, is Piers of Larkford, dealer in small necessities, fine thread, pins, knives, combs, ribbons, pilgrim tokens, needles, belt buckles, salt packets, devotional images, and other honest wares. He says this last phrase too quickly. A man who sells only honest wares usually does not label them so earnestly before breakfast. When the cart shifts again, one of the bundles slides fully open. Out spill ordinary things, first dried lavender tied in bunches, little packets of rosemary and thyme, skeins of red and blue wool thread, bone needles, horn combs, clay beads, and small iron keys meant for chests or cupboards. Then come stranger items, wax hearts wrapped in linen, tiny parchment squares sealed with plain beeswax, black pins tucked into a leather roll, rings of braided hair, bent coins, red ribbons cut to equal lengths, and little cloth pouches smelling of rose, salt, and something sharper beneath. Piers freezes for half a breath. Then he smiles, too broadly for dawn, household goods. Very varied households, you say. He begins gathering them quickly. People need many comforts. You kneel to help, because leaving small wax hearts in the mud seems rude even if they are troubling. The ground is cold beneath your fingers. One parchment square has come unsealed. You glimpse a name written backward, then a cross, then words smudged by damp. You fold it shut without reading more. Some doors, even when opened by accident, should not be entered. Piers watches your face. Charms are not all wicked. I have heard that. Good. Then hear it twice. He tucks the parchments into a wooden box and locks it with one of the small iron keys. A woman buys lavender. No one blinks. She buys lavender stitched with a prayer. The priest squints. She buys lavender with a name. Everyone calls the devil a merchant and blames me for stocking shelves. You do stock them. I stock what people ask for. Half the parish wants courage. The other half wants someone else to behave. That is too neat to be entirely false. You help him gather the herbs into their baskets. The rosemary reminds you of the old herb wife, the shrine, the wise woman's cottage, the abbey relic. Each place has carried the same scent differently memory. Stew, courage, prayer, secrecy. Piers wraps the wax hearts in linen with surprising gentleness. Where do they go, you ask? Markets, manors, villages, sometimes abbeys, though they pretend otherwise. A cook buys for a maid buys for a lady, a groom buys for a knight who calls it protection, a widow buys because no one else will stand between her and loneliness. He pulls a bent coin from the mud and wipes it on his cloak, and some buy for uglier reasons. I do not ask names. But you know enough. His hand still over a roll of thread, knowing is bad for trade and worse for sleep. The axle pin is not broken, only lost. You find it near the bridge, half hidden in frozen grass, and Piers receives it with the reverence normally reserved for relics and warm pies. Together you lift again. He fits the pin, hammers it in with a stone, and ties a strip of leather around the joint for luck. Some swear leather cut from an old shoe keeps a wheel true, especially if the shoe belonged to a traveller who died peacefully. Piers says he prefers leather that is available and not haunted. When the cart stands level, he repacks it carefully. Iron keys in one box, herbs in another, devotional badges in a tray, love tokens under a folded blanket, hidden from casual eyes but not from use. The road brightens by a little. Frost melts from the bridge stones. In the distance, the town wall rises faintly through mist, the same wall you entered beneath at dusk, though now it looks less like a rival and more like a question waiting to be asked again. Before he climbs onto the cart, Piers offers you a small blue bead. Against envy, he says. I have no one to envy me. Then it should be easy work. You almost refuse, then take it and tuck it into your pouch beside the thyme. The dog sneezes, perhaps in judgment, perhaps from frost. Piers clicks his tongue to the mule, and the cart rolls forward with a soft wooden creak. For a while you walk beside it, listening to the hidden wares knock gently beneath their blanket herbs, keys, wax, thread, coins, and unnamed hopes travelling toward buyers no one will name aloud. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the cart carries medicine, comfort, sin, or merely the shape of human wanting packed for market. The town road bends ahead, pale under the lifting morning, and you follow the slow cart toward its gates. You reach the town again as evening gathers blue in the hollows between roofs. The same western gate stands ahead, its arch dark with damp, its iron hinges shining where rain has polished them. The gatekeeper is not the same man as before, or perhaps he is, and the cold has rearranged his face. He takes one look at Piers's cart, one look at the mule, and one long look at the dog, who trots in as if returning from official business. Market's closed, the gatekeeper says. Piers pats the cart side, then my goods are safe from profit. The gatekeeper does not laugh, but he does let you both through. Inside. The town feels changed by everything you have learned and unchanged by everything it refuses to know. Smoke lifts from chimneys. A woman pours wash water into the gutter. A baker rakes ash from his oven. The market cross stands in the dim square, and near it, beneath a shuttered overhang, two men speak too closely together, their words hidden by the bell that begins to ring from the abbey beyond the wall. The sound rolls across the roofs, and for a moment you think of Brother Aldwyn's half-burned candle, still steady beside a doubtful relic. Piers guides his cart toward an inn-yard, but he stops before reaching it. People are gathering near the old Guildhall, a long timber building with a stone undercroft and narrow windows glowing orange from within. The crowd is not merry. It has that tight, eager silence that comes when people expect judgment and hope it will not land on them. What is it, you ask? Piers's face closes. Someone's charm has found a mouth. Inside the Guildhall, the air is thick with smoke, wet wool, and fear. Rushes cover the floor, though they have been trampled into damp mats by too many boots. A hearth burns at one end, and beside it stands a table where the town bailiff sits with two aldermen, a priest, and a clerk with ink already waiting. Candles gutter in iron prickets. Shadows leap along the rafters. Near the wall, you see the serving woman from the tavern, arms folded, face tight. Master Odo stands near the clerk. Summoned perhaps because all troublesome words eventually require someone who can write them down. At the centre of the room stands the woman with the saffron sleeve. By firelight she looks younger than she did at dusk and far more frightened. Her cloak has been taken from her, and she stands in a plain wool gown of dark brown, hair covered by a linen coif slightly askew. On the table before the bailiff lie the contents of a small box red thread, wax hearts, bent pins, folded parchments, dried roses, a child's curl, little cloth bags, and a strip of blue ribbon darkened at one end. Ordinary things, terrible things, foolish things, all made dangerous by being displayed. No one can quite agree. The whispers say, whether she's a charm maker, a seller, a messenger, or only a widow with nimble fingers and fewer choices than debts. Her name is Marjorie. Her husband died 3 winters ago. She rents a back room by the bridge. She mends fine sleeves, sells ribbons, carries notes, and, according to the loudest woman in the hall, ruins households by tying knots. The loudest woman is a baker's wife with red cheeks and grief sharpened into accusation. Her daughter was promised to a cooper's son, she says, until the young man turned his affection elsewhere. A charm was found beneath the girl's mattress wax thread, and a name. The baker's wife points at Marjorie as if pointing can stitch truth together. She made it, she says. She sold it to the other girl. She turned his heart. Marjorie shakes her head. I sold ribbon, only ribbon. The priest lifts one of the folded parchments with 2 fingers. And these? She looks at the floor. Words copied for those who cannot write. What words? Prayers, names, sometimes hopes. The clerk writes hopes with the cautious expression of a man unsure whether it is evidence. People begin to speak from the crowd. Too many at once. A servant says Marjorie gave her lavender for sleep and nothing ill came of it. A man says his sister bought a charm and married badly anyway, which may prove the charm false, or merely that marriage is stronger than magic in the worst possible way. A maid says Marjorie warned her not to put anything in food. A fishwife says she saw noble cloth at Marjorie's window after dark. Someone else mentions Lady Isolde without naming her. And the hall tightens like a drawn cord. You stand near the back with the dog against your boot. Piers stands beside you, pale and silent. In the firelight, his cart goods seem to rattle in memory keys, herbs, thread, wax. Trade has distance when packed under a blanket. Here, distance burns away. The bailiff calls for order. He's not cruel looking, which almost makes the scene worse. Cruel men explain themselves. Ordinary men doing what the crowd expects are harder to hold. He asks Marjorie whether she has ever sold a charm meant to bend another person's will. No, she says too quickly. Ever made a wax heart? For offerings, for jokes, for girls who wanted courage. And for binding, she closes her mouth. The hall hears the silence as confession, but silence can be many things. Shame, fear, protection, weariness. Even now, it is hard to tell whether Marjorie hides guilt, kindness, or the names of buyers safer than herself. Master Odo steps forward. His voice is dry but steady. Many who ask for such things do not understand what they ask. The baker's wife snaps, and those who sell understand coin. Odo bows his head slightly, struck where truth has teeth. Brother Aldwin is not here, yet his warning seems to move through the hall. Love that seeks to master is appetite wearing a ribbon. But tonight you see another truth beneath it. When appetite wears a ribbon, the hand blamed is often the one that tied it for pay, not the stronger hand that demanded obedience, arranged the marriage, broke the promise, spread the rumour, or came secretly by night with money and a name. The priest orders the charms burned. The bailiff fines Marjorie more than she can easily pay and forbids her to sell written charms, sealed packets, wax figures, or knotted threads within the town. If she's found doing so again, he says, the matter will go beyond the hall to harsher courts. No one says what that means. Everyone understands enough. Marjorie sways once but does not fall. The small box is carried to the hearth. One by one, the objects go into the flame, red threads curling black, dried roses flaring briefly, parchment shrinking. wax hearts softening into shapeless shine before vanishing. The smell is sweet, smoky, and sad. Some swear burning a charm breaks its working. Others say burning only changes who remembers it. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, and tonight disagreement feels less like mystery than mercy withheld. The baker's wife weeps without satisfaction. Marjorie watches her livelihood melt. Piers looks at the floor. The dog presses closer to your leg as sparks climb the chimney and disappear into the dark throat above. When the hall empties, no one seems victorious. The candles burn low, the rushes steam near the hearth. Outside, the town bell rings late into the night, and you remain by the dying fire long enough to see the last twist of red thread collapse into ash. The Guildhall empties by degrees, as all troubled rooms do. First the loudest voices leave, still carrying their anger because anger is easy to lift and hard to put down. Then the curious drift out, disappointed that judgment has not turned into a cleaner story. Then the officials gather their parchments, coins, candle stubs, and official faces. The priest goes last among them, pausing at the hearth where Marjorie's little wares have become blackened scraps and soft shining puddles of wax. He crosses himself, but whether for sin, pity, smoke, or the difficulty of knowing one from another, no one can quite agree. You remain near the dying fire with the dog leaning against your leg. The serving woman from the tavern stands across the hearth, arms folded into her apron. Master Odo scrapes dried ink from his fingers with the thumbnail. Piers of Larkford stares into the ash, as if some part of his cart has burned there too, though his goods remain hidden in the inn-yard beneath their blanket. Marjorie is gone, led out by a cousin or a neighbour. You're not sure which, in a town this small. Those roles often overlap when shame enters the street. A last twist of red thread curls in the coals, darkens, and disappears. The serving woman exhales. They will say justice was done. Odo answers without looking up. They always say something. Piers shifts his weight. She sold what people wanted. So do taverns, the serving woman says, yet ale still leaves men foolish. That's hardly ale's fault every time. No, she says, but the brewer eats. Her words settle among you, plain and uncomfortable. The hearth pops softly. A candle on the bailiff's table gutters in its iron pricket, the flame bending low, then lifting again. You remember Brother Aldwyn's half-burned beeswax candle by the relic, the wise woman's sheep bells, Lady Isolde's hidden token, Ewan's stolen ribbon, Beatrice's closed hand. Each memory feels like another small object laid on this same table, waiting for someone to name it clean or unclean. Some swear love charms belong to darkness because they invite forbidden powers. Some swear they are only poor people's prayers, made from thread and wax because thread and wax are what poor people have. Some swear they do nothing at all except reveal the heart of the one who buys them. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the worst magic lies in the charm, the wish, or the world that leaves so many wishes desperate enough to hide. Outside, the town sleeps badly. When you step from the Guildhall, the night is cold and moonless, with mist gathered in the lanes and frost beginning to silver the edges of wheel ruts. The dog trots ahead, then looks back to make sure you follow. You pass the market cross, rain-worn and pale. The stalls are shuttered. A loose strip of cloth flaps under an awning. Somewhere behind a wall, a baby cries, then quiets. Somewhere else, a man coughs and spits into straw. Above the roofs, the Abbey bell marks an hour so late it feels almost outside time. You return to the tavern because there is nowhere else to go before morning. The serving woman lets you in without speech. Inside, The hearth has been banked low, and the rushes smell of smoke and old ale. She gives you a bench near the wall and a wool blanket with a patched corner. "Sleep if you can," she says. You sit instead for a while, watching the coals. A horseshoe hangs above the tavern hearth, a sprig of dried saint. John's wort trembles near the door whenever the wind finds a crack. Your pouch holds the blue bead from Piers, the thyme from the wise woman, and the rosemary, bruised now, that began in the market. Ordinary things, comforting things, suspicious things, if named by the wrong mouth in the wrong room. Near dawn, you wake without knowing when sleep took you. The room is dark grey. The fire is ash with a red heart hidden low inside it. The serving woman moves quietly, setting bread on a board and pouring small ale into cups for those who must leave before sunrise. She gives you a piece of coarse bread wrapped in cloth, as she did before, and for a moment the tale folds back upon itself. At the western gate, mist lies thick over the ditch. The gatekeeper yawns behind his lantern. He unlocks the oak door with an iron key, and the sound is slow, heavy, final. Behind you, the town remains market, tavern, guildhall, abbey bells, manor road, shrine rain, frost forest, smoke-black rafters, all its hidden knots and little hungers. Ahead, the road waits in pale mud. The dog steps through first. You follow, and the bell sounds once behind the wall, softer than before. Morning opens gently, not bright, but clear enough. The fields beyond the town are washed in pearl-coloured mist. Frost lies on the hedges like breath made visible. Your boots press into the road with a quiet, familiar pull. The dog walks at your side, no longer seeming strange, and the rosemary in your sleeve gives off one last faint sweetness when your hand brushes it. You think now of the dark truth, and it is not that wax can command a heart, nor that thread can bind a soul, nor that old words can force love to kneel. The darker truth is softer, sadder, and more human people reach for charms when ordinary mercy feels too far away. They knot thread because promises break. They warm wax because rooms grow cold. They whisper names because no one listens when they speak plainly. Sometimes they harm, sometimes they hope. Often they do not know the difference until the ashes are already cooling. So you carry no easy judgment from the town, only doubt and pity, and the slow knowledge that love without freedom is not love, however sweetly it is wrapped. The road lengthens before you, pale under the waking sky. The abbey bell fades until it is only a memory inside the mist. Your cloak grows warmer as you walk. The dog's paws make small marks beside yours, then more, a quiet stitching across the soft earth. And now the world grows still. The town sinks behind you, its roofs lowered into fog, its candles spent, its doors closed gently against the morning cold. The last smoke from the hearths lifts straight upward, thin and blue, and the fields breathe with that calm that comes just before the day remembers its burdens. You do not hurry. There is no need to hurry now. The road is simple beneath your feet. The air is cool but kind, and somewhere far away a cock calls once, then gives the silence back. You let the old fears loosen. You let the ribbons fall still. You let the wax harden into harmless shapes. The faces you have seen soften in memory, Lady Isolde, by the narrow window. Beatrice in the courtyard, Marjorie beside the fire, Brother Aldwyn shielding the candle, the wise woman turning wool into thread, the serving woman sweeping rushes before dawn. They remain in the dimness, not judged, not forgotten, only resting. The mist gathers low over the road, and your thoughts grow slower with it. Each step is quieter than the last. The dog keeps close. The rosemary scent fades. The bells are gone now, and there is only breath and damp earth and the soft grey light of morning spreading over the fields like a blanket drawn carefully up to the chin. You are safe to leave the town behind. You are safe to close your eyes. The fire has burned low, the charms are ash, the road is calm, and the old medieval world settles gently into darkness, as if someone has lowered a hand over a candle flame and whispered that it is time, at last, to sleep.